Very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the Medico-Legal Conclave of Akriti. Akriti is a group of 18 friends who wants to do something different, not only sitting in a kitty and eating and chatting. In that way, the Akriti has come in front of you with the breast saga 6 months back, and today here we are with the Medico-Legal Conclave, which is today is the burning topic for all of us. We are wearing a sari which is not white. Why? Because the white color of a doctor is become red with the blood of red and become little bit dirty with the why? Who is at fault? Whether we or the society? I think somewhere us, because we don't go to the society and tell our part. Because of that, today's the Medical Legal Conclave is bridging the gap with the society, with the lawmaker, with the policy makers. And my request to each of you, very much in time, very crisp message to everyone. And the extra talking is a main culprit. What you talk unnecessary in front of the patient, what your staff talk, and this sometime take you to the court. So learn here first thing to give the crisp message, precise message, follow the protocols, follow the SOP, and document everything.
The mop and instruments and close the patient. Do not remove the IV lines, catheter or the nasogastric tube. Ensure that they are in place. Preserve all broken ampules. This we've already done. Double check the notes documented and that you have followed the standard operating protocols, and go over again with the staff what they have to speak so that there is no discrepancy.
Thank you, Dr. Arti. So my next question is to Dr. Poonam June. A prescription of certain life-saving emergency drugs was given to the attendants from the OT. So do you think that is this
No, I think this is not at all appropriate for multiple reasons. A, the kind of drug you are giving, it's a life-saving drug. It is a drug which is required not only in the OT, it is required in post-op, it is required even in a ward.
Yeah.
B, it is the timing. You cannot give a drug prescription to a patient when you've already sensitized them that the patient is getting sick. And that too in a OT, a place where intensive care is required, critical care is required. Patient is already the attendant is already traumatized that the patient is getting sick, and now you tell them to fetch medicine. So it is a total failure of preparedness for emergency situation, and it reflects really badly on any institution that they cannot handle emergency situation.
Yeah,
so I think it's not at all appropriate to, at that point of time, you tell them.
Very nice. So here we can give a reference to Magilal Rastagi versus Rohini Hospital in May 2026, where the patient's relative were asked to get life-saving drugs, F-choline and dopamine from the market after 30 minutes of a successful appendix surgery when the patient already had cardiac arrest. So the message is that don't ask for anything.
If the blood is required, then who and the nursing home, if it happens in a nursing home, and the blood is already arranged, but it is somebody has to go and get it. So I think we should not send the relatives to get that blood, and only the hospital person should go and get it.
Yeah.
In fact, we can inform the relative.
Crash card and emergency trays should always be ready. They always be filled up to be checked by OT staff and your nursing staff.
Every day.
That there is no deficiency in crash card and emergency trays.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just wanted to say regarding blood that, inform the relatives about the condition, and then you tell the relatives that we are arranging for blood, so don't worry. So at least they should be in the loop that the blood is being arranged, every effort is
Exactly.
made. And if the emergency drugs are being asked for, the relatives will lose confidence, and then when we are passing on an information of DOT, see, this adds together to the catastrophic situation which may occur.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, we are all aware that imprecise and incomplete documents can create difficulties for the practitioner. So what details should one ensure to have flawless records? Nowadays, documentation is very important, so we want to know from you.
Yeah, we've already heard how important documentation is. But I will say, even before the DOT occurs in a routine case also, it's very essential because we do not know. Obstetrics is especially such a thing where, a low risk patient will suddenly become in high risk and we'll end up with these kind of catastrophic situations. So we have to start right from the beginning. The initial assessment of the patient which we are doing, including the identification of the patient, the correct name and everything is required. And secondly, the initial assessment, we should not miss on any comorbid conditions, any history of intervention if patient has already had, any history of allergies to any drug. So these kind of informations later may come handy. So these detailed information in the initial assessment is essential. Then secondly, the monitoring and reviewing of the patient. See, it should be documented frequently. And sometimes where the standard protocol is already laid out, how frequently, like you should monitor fetal heart, how frequently this should be done. So if we have a standard already laid out, we should strictly document according to the standard. And, also, whenever patient develops a complication,
Right, ma'am.
see, we should not hide it. And I think we should counsel the patient because any surgery, any procedure which we are doing, complications are likely to occur. But if we apprise them right in the beginning, and also I think we should keep following, and like somebody said that, the whole trail has to be maintained so that the patient at the end of the day is not taken by a surprise. See, if some complication PPH has occurred as in this case. So we should tell right in the beginning, keep informing them time to time. Even if the patient is deteriorating, they should be prepared for the news, rather than being taken by a surprise. And any time any new procedure is being done, consent has to be taken. So one is an initial consent, which we have written consent, documented we have taken. We should also take consent of any modified procedure which we are going to do, and it should be taken from a responsible attendant. ये नहीं कि वहाँ कोई गया हुआ है और हमने जो भी खड़ा था उसको इन्फॉर्म कर दिया. We should ensure the person who's being counseled is a responsible person.
So beautifully narrated, ma'am. So documentation is very important. हम लोग हिंदी में कहते हैं कि जो करा नहीं लिखा वो हो गया, और जो लिखा नहीं, जो करा और लिखा नहीं वो नहीं हुआ. So documentation is that important. And
there is also one line, scripta volent, verba volent and scripta manent, that spoken words fly away but written words remain.
There is one comment if I would like to make.
Yeah,
Dr.
yes,
Shashi.
ma'am.
May I?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I was just wanting to clarify that documentation, we should look at it in two parts.
Yes, ma'am.
One is routine documentation. Like, for example, this case that you talked about, she came in, the first few hours is routine management and labor. So over there, what Dr. Punita said about documenting fetal heart and contractions, etc., at regular intervals is important. Now, the next part of the documentation comes up when the actual crisis starts.
Right.
Like when you're in the OT, the PPH is happening. Now, at that point of time, there is actually, honestly speaking, I'm not a legal expert, I must say this. It's just that I've got a little more gray hair than some others in this room, and I've been a little more frequently associated with the Delhi Medical Council. But otherwise, so eventually, when these cases are coming up for examination, it's 2 or 3 or X years down the line, when nobody or very few people remember actually what happened, and therefore everybody is going strictly by what is written. There is no memory there, there is nothing. So what is written, only that is being followed. Now, when the case is in the OT and deteriorating very rapidly, there is, honestly speaking, and we know, nobody to make those notes. So those notes are eventually put down in a bunch together after the event has happened. So I personally have always told my residents to do it at the end, right, that this is the documentation is being done at such and such time, but the chronological order of management has been like this. As I'm not a legal expert, I would like to ask the legal expert that what is his opinion in the court of law for this, because this is actually what happens and we go by this. So We can't have somebody keep on writing 10:15 this happened, 10:20, 10:18 something happened, when eventually patient dies at 11. So after patient has died, then only I have got the time to write the notes. So this is acceptable in the law or not?
See, when we are deciding cases as a judge, the basic gold standard is that your documentation has to be logical and in sequence. And I completely understand from where you're coming. In fact, I've also wondered, then you're having a PPH situation, you can't be possibly documenting. So as long as the document reflects the sequence of events, truthfully recorded at the right time, a court of law will rely upon it to that extent. But for example, I noticed a comment about overwriting, and that's all often a situation when you see a document and something's overwritten. I mean, a typical court of law, it rings a bell and you're saying like, you know, what is there?
So
I
it
think
is
another point
fairly
that
well
I-
understandable by courts of law here, ma'am, that yes, and in fact courts have commented very, you know, categorically that it is all right that you put all the notes at the end. It's just like, you know, a patient coming with a life-saving emergency to the casualty, the priority is life and the notes can come later. So similarly for other situations, you can put all the bunch of notes together chronologically. It is very well accepted by the courts. But yes, sometimes at the same time, the police may arrive and say कि नहीं नहीं जो है बस दे दो, वो छीन के ले जाएंगे types, ठीक है ले जाने दो. Just write one line at the end, submitted under protest. Documents still to be completed. Okay, just write that, put your signature. That means you are not given by these are practical situations that have happened, not given enough time by the police to complete your records and submit to them.
But sir, I think, see, most of the time, by the time we are declaring DOT to the, to the patient, we've already had little time to complete the documentation, because by the time the hearing will come, it will be probably 3 years or, you know, even more than that. So what Dr. Reva said, absolutely, that we can say that the proper protocol for resuscitation was followed and these were the sequence of events. But what I'm saying is that when we are documenting and we have some standard protocol, we should not miss that. See, we should the documentation should be done. We've already done that, you know, these, resuscitative procedures we follow, but sometimes when we are writing or leaving the notes to be written by a junior person, some of the important points are missed. So make sure that when you are closing the case sheet, especially in event where DOT has occurred, the case sheet has to be numbered, pages have to be numbered. They should be preferably in a death summary, no overwriting. You know, then it gives an impression that these things have been added later on.
But
And
the
of course,
nurses in the OT who are giving the drugs sometimes can keep the record of IV fluids, drugs and etc.
right, ma'am, but sometimes what happens is when emergency has occurred, all the nurses and everybody is running around. Probably there is nobody to keep a record, but immediately after the event has occurred, before we are really declaring, we can put down some staff to summarize and write. And I think this shouldn't happen that, of course we will write that submitted the papers in protest, but it's better to put in, sir, after 3 years, people will not even trust us that we had given those medicines. I've seen those, where the documents are so inadequate and you have to recall what all happened, and then, when we are hearing people from the same institute, two people will give two different, versions. So then it becomes very difficult and things, take a bad turn.
We should also not only document the medical part. Medical means in terms of drugs given or procedure done or something. Each time when in a patient like this, somebody would have gone out and spoken to the relatives at least 2 or 3 times to tell them that the patient's condition is deteriorating. That should also be documented, and preferably you should have somebody, some paramedical person or somebody from your admin or whatever available to take a consent then and there. Not rely on the earlier consent that you have taken for the surgery, or koi pareshani ho sakti hai, death bhi ho, I mean, that chance of death is 1 in 1,000. But now this condition is such that this chance of death is 1 in 2. So there's a world of difference between these two situations and should not be forgotten.
Yeah, very valid input,
I
Dr.
wanted
Reva.
to add another point was that when we are submitting the papers, do they have to be the original file, or is it the photocopy that we submit?
No, we
to the
submit
police?
photocopy. Original only police can take when some FIR or some legal proceedings
So
have to be
original
done.
we keep to ourselves, and
Always
only the
keep.
photocopies.
Unless and until on court order, you have to give to the police.
Where are you submitting this file?
No, the patients, the police comes and wants evidence, so
Police
they
takes
want
it.
the papers.
Police wants original papers.
Original we cannot give.
Police wants original
Unless and until it is court order.
If the police, yes, I think the police,
Yes.
police can take the So we will keep a photocopy with us and give the original.
In a court of law, the ultimate evidence is on the originals. So the custody of the originals, if as rightly said, if it happens, will go to the police or the state. And ultimately, when one is being cross-examined or examined, the reference will have to be done to the originals. That's the primary evidence, what we call it. Anything which is a photocopy has to be then secondary evidence, which we have to figure out who made the photocopy.
So it's better then, sir, to declare, by the time we declare DOT, I think we should complete our original case sheet. And secondly, as I said earlier, every time the patient's condition deteriorates and somebody is going there counseling, that has to be recorded there and then. And we may have to take a reconsent. See, consent was initially taken for a cesarean, but now we'll end up doing some procedure. So that consent somebody goes and takes, and it has to be documented. That's very, very essential.
The consent will, in an emergency, you don't need any consent from any other person. If the patient, information, but no consent.
Information has to be parted on with the relatives so they don't get aggravated.
But the point is that suppose you are doing a PPH, you have done your conservative methods, now you are landing up with a hysterectomy. Will you not take a consent from
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. In a state of emergency, you don't need a consent.
with the hysterectomy, but you will have to have on
I think we have to inform the attendants and take a consent from the attendants.
Yes.
Although patient is not in a condition to give consent, but attendants can.
I would
Ma'am,
suggest
proxy
it's
consent has got absolutely no value, and in a state of emergency, we need absolutely no consent. We have to just go and treat the patient.
the consent.
And we have justice with us. Let's take his expert opinion.
Sir, before sir says, I just want to say the idea of taking this consent is it's an indirect evidence that we have informed the attendant.
Exactly.
See, it may not be consent per se may not be valid because it is a consent of a second person. But that is the only evidence we have that we are informed timely.
Building up with them, informing them what's happening with their patient.
See, I think, again, see, it's very difficult to have a blanket rule, because your medical situations vary from time to time, as you've all rightly said. An emergency can happen. So suppose that document comes to a court of law. Now the court of law also applies its mind to the situation. If you read the details, then suppose it says that, well, this is a medical situation, emergency happened. Then the court will also not expect that immediate consent would have been obtained at that point of time. However, informed, recorded consent is always a very good basis for defense.
Absolutely.
And also now there are suggestions that consent should also be videographed, which proves the worth of the consent which is being given. So increasingly there are more situations, at least prior consents. At that emergent situation may not be possible, but then processes have to be put in. I mean, that's an ideal situation. We all hope everything is ideal, but I know it's practically doesn't happen.
So because
but it's not as if the courts of law, you see, we deal with generally speaking, a court of law deals with practicalities on a daily level. There is a theory and there's a practical issue. But so we are trained to sift through that. It's not as if somebody will just throw it out. So it's always that case.
See, whenever we are modifying a procedure, see, I'd also attended and taken some of the legal opinions. They said any modification of the procedure, surgical procedure or whatever you are doing. See,
this will be in a non-emergency situation. At the time of emergency.
Answer is very simple. for giving a consent, वो patient is not in a position to give consent.
Even when you are modifying a procedure on the
Patient
OT
है ही
table,
नहीं.
patient is
Therefore,
not
you
there.
have to take a consent from.
I just want to add one line.
The information should be given. It should be documented. That's all.
In this type of situation.
Yes, it has to be done.
In this.
Yes.
But
yes.
But
and this
but
has to be documented. That whatever
one
you
more
did
thing.
should be documented.
They should know what is going on inside the OT.
Just let me add one thing.
So, ma'am,
Whenever-
for a life-saving procedure, I think we do not need consent if it is
No, we
saving the
don't.
life of a
No.
patient.
Even
We
then
don't.
we have to inform.
But yes,
It is-
information has to be given.
When
But
you are
we don't
giving-
need a consent.
When you are taking the initial consent, at that time all the complications, all the side effects, all the long-term hazards need to be told. The chances of going over to an ICU, shifting over to another hospital, involving another doctor for this position, जिस समय आप prior informed consent लेते हैं in the starting.
But I would.
Yes.
Everything. I'm very. It has to be patient. Has
The
Just एक लाइन में बताना चाहती हूँ. If the patient, we have taken the patient for cesarean. If because of PPH we have to do hysterectomy, वो एक new procedure है. यदि उस समय हम बाहर जाके relative को ये बता देते हैं कि the condition has worsened so much कि it requires hysterectomy, तो उसको better communication हो जाता है कि condition बहुत critical हो गई है. तो better prepared होता है accept करने के लिए जेट को बाद में. ये एक important मेरा point है.
This is very important, and now we have all agreed that anything, any mishap which is happening in the OT or labor room, it needs to be informed to the attendants and preferably taken in writing that they are informed. Moving up to the next question. Yes.
Dr. Nisha, I want to add
Yes,
one
Dr.
thing.
Ritu.
We have another, our team members, because whenever there is a situation, we call for team help. So another gynecologist who is our colleague can always talk to the relative. And another important thing is when you write the notes, it is so important that your notes are reviewed by your fellow colleague who assisted you, and note should be from all of the team members, and it should be coherent. Your and anesthetist record should be in coherence. Plus, if you have to save yourself in the law, then your this OT should have your maintenance register, like you have checked the expiry of the drugs, you have your crash cart ready, you have checked all these, you have your defib things recording pasted in your register, so that you know that you have a well maintained OT. So all these things help in future.
Absolutely.
She's right.
And I would like to add one thing. I'm a lawyer by profession. What ma'am said is absolutely right. Even in a case, there's a Samira Kohli judgment which talks about that it is the consent of the patient that has to be taken. Samira Kohli was a case of laparoscopy in which hysterectomy had to be done and all those things.
It was not an emergency. The
It was-
difference
yes,
with
ma'am.
Samira
Yes,
Kohli is
exactly.
it's not an emergency.
So Supreme Court delineated what is emergency consent and all those things. We need to understand that recently in 2020, NCD, there is a case of Anuja Chaudhary versus Shivam Hospital, in which NCDRC gave a clean chit to the doctor because the patient's condition was deteriorating. She was bleeding, and it so happened that neither the father-in-law was there, neither the husband was there near the operation theatre. So the doctor went and informed the mother and took the oral consent. So the court, when the court goes through the file, it gets to know ultimately it's your duty of care. It's your duty to save the patient. As long as you have documented, you have a clean chit from the courts. Courts are very logical. The judges are very logical. Sir is sitting in front of me. So as long as you've documented, it's all right. But at that time, the most medical negligence comes when the patient is in trouble. As long as you've done your bit well and you've done whatever is required to save her. First, the thing is to save the patient. That's what my thing is.
And I just want to say that the operating surgeon, वो है team leader actually. तो उसकी responsibility is primary. So therefore, वो ही जाके जब when it has to be declared कि DOT हो गई, ये नहीं कि so many times I have seen वो जो बेचारा surgeon ही 150 उसकी पल्स होके बैठ जाता है, मतलब ये क्या हो गया, ये क्या हो गया. That has, you have to maintain your composure. You yourself have to go and tell. ये नहीं कि anesthetist को भेज दिया या junior doctor को भेज दिया. Nothing like that. It has to be open and
for this
told
you can
properly.
call your colleagues, calm down, sit in a place, call the attendants, and slowly all your colleagues and supporting members of your team will support the surgeon and he'll declare.
I just wanted to support in that sense that the court of law will see in a high risk situation the standard would be applied would be logically different. That's all. Because you understand that the doctor who's on the operating table has had to take that decision to save the life of the patient, which is the, as he rightly said, is the duty of care. Ultimately, it forms in the duty of care. What's the duty of care? So it's not as if it will be blind that you did not take consent or something. It will be weighed in those circumstances. There's no question about it.
Sir, in the case of Samira Kohli also, the court said that in case, when the doctor said that it was a case of emergency when I operated, the court said if it was an emergency, you never needed a consent. Why did you go out and take the consent of the mother? So this was taken as a negative factor for the doctor.
See, this part is the second part about proving medical negligence. The question is, you have to face the wrath once you are declaring DOT.
Yeah.
So if you are not time to time, see, it's not that the operating surgeon necessarily will go, anesthetist can go out, somebody else of the team member can go out, and you have, just a minute, not to declare DOT. I'm saying before, when the seriousness of the patient has to be communicated, and it has to be, if it is documented properly that the counseling has been done and this has been informed, will always be good.
Yeah, communication, as I said even earlier, that has to be given as a bulletin to the relative.
Yes, and it should be documented, not necessarily by the operating surgeon.
So finally, we all agree that all the complications need to be communicated and documented. So let's move on to our next question. That is that Dr. Vandana, what are the legal implications of making additions and deletions in the existing case records?
That's a big no. Everyone knows any tampering with the records, if it is suspicion, if the court raises a suspicion about it, then you are in trouble. It's a criminal offense, I would think so. It's a criminal offense.
No, if you're doing an overwriting, then it is.
No additions and deletions. No addition.
No, it depends when addition is being done and when this deletion is being done.
Yes.
That is very important. You have given the records to the police or the photocopy to somebody, and then you are doing some addition and deletion. That is criminal.
See, in a hospital.
But you can complete your records.
The patient was serious. You have written few things, and a day later you realize the records are still with you. A day later you realize something was missing. You can do an addendum. That's in computer. है ना, इन द पेपर्स की बात नहीं हो रही है. पेपर्स में तो आप ऐड करो, बट इट हैज़ टू बी इन द सेम पेन एंड सेम हैंड राइटिंग और सॉर्ट ऑफ अ थिंग. बट इन द कंप्यूटर इट इज़ डेटेड एंड टाइम्ड. So over there also you are allowed to put additional notes as an addendum, but not after if it will be considered as a tampering.
और ऐसे करेगी तो साइन करके टाइम और डेट डालिए उसको.
Yes, time वो तो कंप्यूटर में
वो जो
टाइम तो
अगर कटिंग भी करिए तब भी उसको
कटिंग भी नहीं no cutting.
Okay. I would request our esteemed expert Dr. Reva Tripathi to comment on this.
I would not go with any overwriting at all, because overwriting is definitely suspect. It may be very genuine. I can imagine that there are situations where, most situations, in fact, people are not trying to cover up. But I think that in this kind of legal scenario, it will be considered suspect. Personally, I'm not sure about the addition later. Your point was correct that I may remember later that I missed out on something, but I'm not sure whether I could add that. That's one question.
Ma'am, that is
and
allowed.
Another question that I would like to ask the Honorable
Justice,
Justice
yes.
is that does the current situation of the soft copy or computer entries change anything, or does it remain the same?
See, we are accepting electronic evidence. Our courts are actually paperless.
Right.
I don't have paper in my court. At least the Delhi High Court is completely paperless. So the documents we see, for example, MLCs in the criminal court, we see MLCs all the time. In fact, overwriting can be very suspect.
Yes,
we
absolutely
have
right,
the
sir.
ability to expand it and actually carefully see
Yes.
as to what is the overwriting
Right,
happening.
right.
That's an assessment you have to make
Right,
yourself.
right.
And sometimes in rape victims and all that, you see that, was it, what was happening? And it could be any case. So certainly overwriting avoidable. But then again, as Dr. Eva said that, it'll be natural for you to scribble something or whatever. Again, it's a question of common sense and logic being utilized by the court. Your suggestion of possibly in that situation to say you create another addendum, to say, well, I did record this, but there's a reason for me recording it otherwise, may be taken kindly by a court.
Yes, but you should do
Maybe.
it. No, that's what I'm saying.
But if you scribble on the side, because
No,
you,
no,
you
no,
see,
no
you can
scribbling,
also
not
score. So for example, if you are malafide in any way, next day you can score something out and put a date of whatever you're liking,
Right.
because
No,
those
no,
records
no,
have
no.
still not
That's
been
not
sealed
allowed.
and
Not
they're
on the
still under
paper.
your custody.
Yeah, not in the paper.
But electronic records are accepted under the Information Technology
Yes.
Act. You have to give an affidavit
Right.
of 65B, Indian
Right.
Evidence Act, but
Right.
that's done, that who's creating the record.
So digital one is a better
Yeah,
one, I would
electronic
think.
records are accepted. I'm happy to hear that. But are they expected to be in equal detail as manual?
Yes.
So
Yes,
no
yes.
difference between the
Yes,
two.
yes. All the entries, everything has
So
to be done.
That's
in a
a
sequential
challenge
manner.
for many of us, especially old people who are not so computer savvy. But the message is that that's what you have to learn to do.
Can't we send the scan copy
Max
of
Shalimar Bagh has no paper. It is only electronic.
No.
Yeah, all Max hospitals are.
No, many of the corporate hospitals are now becoming electronic versions
Paperless,
only.
yes.
So,
See,
older hospitals that have the
So those are the
written
places where you
document
need
is
to
fine.
put an addendum later on. So you cannot
Ma'am,
scribble.
I should say that you must have heard the Chief Justice of India, but all our senior most judges have all converted to electronic. So it is not a question of,
Yes.
it's just an adaptation. It's slightly difficult, but once you convert to it, it's easier.
Easier.
For
obviously.
documentation,
Recall
it's easier.
is easier.
But
Recall and review is far more easier on an electronic device rather.
Most of the government hospitals. No,
So that is
in fact,
digitalization of your scan copies, no?
No.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's not an issue at all.
You have,
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
let the technology work for you.
For you,
In the way
yeah.
it is. You don't have to be a slave to the technology. The
Yep.
technology is your slave.
See,
Mostly all MRD departments now are resorting to this. MLC cases and all these death cases are being kept as electronic records in the hospitals, most of the hospitals, I
So
suppose.
this is the story of the corporate. In the government settings, most of even the tertiary care hospitals are still maintaining physical record.
Have physical.
And in case required, we send the scan copy. So the principle is applicable there also. There should be
You
no.
can do addendum, yeah. You can
yeah.
do an
So-
addendum,
so
but
only
it has to
thing
be
is-
properly documented, dated. In computer, it will be automatically done for you. Right?
And
you
I
cannot
think-
put an entry in the previous day.
Right, right.
May
And
I-
it will be dated and timed.
May I suggest that this addendum should not be taken so casually?
Not
I think-
casually, ma'am, it is-
I think we should be very clear that when we are putting the notes itself, that these are kind of going to be final.
Yeah, yeah.
Unless there kind of some exigency that I had a very genuine error and I forgot. Because this addendum, I don't know how the courts would take it, but I would be skeptical.
Well, it depends on the situation.
On
Really
depends on
the
the- yeah,
situation. I think
yeah.
if you digitize records, I would think they'll be truer to that extent, because once you've entered it, there's a date stamp. In technology,
That's what I'm saying. It's
in
automatic.
technology, you can always go
It's
back and say
automatic.
that, well, did you enter this data?
Yeah.
It's always possible.
You can't-
With an
you can't
EMR, this is
predate
the
it, you can't
problem.
postdate it.
So that advantage is there.
That's a very big advantage.
You need to have a very proper sound logic as to why you
Yes, yes, that logic has to be given, ma'am. And then that's what I'm saying, addendum, digital addendum can be given and it has to be in synchrony with what you have given.
Whenever an
We have on a
No crossing.
So
No crossing.
we sign our. No, I'm just telling you, in our in judgments, which are supposed to be extremely important for everybody, we digitally sign it. Every night I digitally sign and leave for home, and there's a click there for a corrigendum. So a system, a digital system, can incorporate a possibility of a corrigendum, which
Yes.
will have a date stamp.
Date
So in
stamp.
fact, we correct our judgment sometimes with a
Absolutely
corrigendum
right.
also.
Okay, we can continue it later on. Let's go to our next question, which is when should an insurance company be informed about the death of the patient, Dr. Divya Singhal?
There is no requirement to inform immediately. It's only when the court of law sends a notice, or the patient's lawyer sends us a notice or a letter, or we receive a direct complaint from the patient. So that is the time when we inform the insurance. That is what
I would like the expert comments. Any of our experts, what we should do?
I don't know, I'm no expert. But
Okay.
how does the hospital get paid then if they haven't informed the hospital, the insurance?
Yeah, the insurance company has to be informed whenever we sense that this patient can go against us, can file a complaint, or we receive a notice from the lawyer, or hospital receives a complaint against the doctor, the MS receives. So all these situations we should inform our insurance company. After the claim is decided and we start informing the insurance company, they may negate, they may say we will not pay you the compensation. So it has to be informed timely.
Immediately, yeah. No, the health of the patient has to be informed.
There are
See,
two
you
kinds
are-
of insurance. One is the indemnity insurance and the other is the patient insurance.
Patient insurance.
So
This
so
is
they
about,
are two
this
different
was about indemnity, madam.
Acha, sorry, I didn't understand.
Do we inform immediately after the death, irrespective of the fact whether we are going to get a notice or not?
Indemnity can be later, as you said.
Not without a notice.
We can, but it will put an extra onus on our insurance company. What are your relations with your insurance company? It depends on that. But basically,
No,
when you
we're not
sense a
supposed
problem, only then there's a point to inform them or involve them. So let's go to our next question. What all specific aspects will be covered under professional indemnity?
So professional indemnity is an insurance. It covers the legal expenses incurred while you're trying to defend yourself. It covers the damages that are awarded by the court, and also certain compensation claims, like you've done unintentional error or omission, or there is a breach of confidentiality. But more important is you should know what it doesn't cover. It doesn't cover if you've done any procedure under intoxication. It doesn't cover if you've done a fraudulent, practices. If you're willful, you've done some criminal cases, or you're doing neglect by choice. And it doesn't even cover HIV. It doesn't cover bariatric surgery, plastic surgery, but that can be covered if you're giving a premium scheme. So what is important to know what also it doesn't cover.
Just one thing I want to point it out, just previous slide, that whenever you are getting the insurance, please make it sure that they are covering your technical staff also, employees also, who are trained and untrained. If they commit any mistakes, so that should also be covered under insurance. That we have to take when we are taking the insurance.
Yeah.
Just be careful about it.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
So there are two types of policy for the coverage of hospital and for the doctor.
They are making,
Collecting
a lot of phone calls, and they are collecting people. They are passing remarks that that they are not happy with the treatment given here. So all these are the signs, I think, which should make sure that which gives you an inkling that there's going to be a mob, reaction or something.
Yeah,
like
this is something called as a stamp approach, where S is for staring, T is for tone and the volume of the voice which goes up, A is anxiety, M is mumbling, and P is pacing, which is again a symbol of agitation. Then as soon as the death is declared, a crowd of 50 people gathered outside. What precautions should be taken by the practitioner to save himself from mob violence? Dr.
So
Divya.
first of all, we inform the police, and we inform the police before the patient's attendants inform, and we have a security ready. We also call our doctors help group and have enough doctors to help. In spite of all this, if you still feel that we're in then it's best to leave.
Yeah,
No,
and a
they were
code
able to
violate
go
should.
undetected.
Yeah.
Registration
Yeah.
of FIR under Doctors Prevention of Violence Act.
Yes.
This is there in 20 states.
Yeah.
That is the most important thing. You must
This is the
follow
medical.
that FIR.
This is the medical service institutions and Medicare institutions prevention of violence, damage and loss to property act of 2008, under which you need to file an FIR.
Yeah, but that time you are saving your own life also.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And any damage
Don't
to
get-
property will also be covered under the act.
Yeah.
And if found guilty, the patient party might have to pay double the billing amount of that property that has been damaged.
And you should
So it's
have
a
an
very
exit also.
Yes, ma'am.
A special exit where you can run away from.
It's a
If
very
you can,
powerful
if you
act,
can.
very
Yeah, not
sparingly
in-
used by doctors and almost with little knowledge among doctors, and should be made mandatory. Now we are teaching it in MBPS for the current batches. So most of us do not know. And in fact, we had started a abhiyan in east of Delhi, and going around police stations and telling them that this is this is a law that is available for doctors. And to our surprise, even people up to the level of DCP did not know about the existence of this. So except the few states in the Seven Sisters in the Northeast, it is there in almost all states, 20 states in our country. And again, it is a very powerful weapon in the hands of medical establishment and doctors, and we are not using it. We must know about it.
So we insist
you,
on
sir.
filing the FIR under this act.
Under this act, yes.
But the only problem is that immediate, the rescue is what she's
No, the
very
FIR would
nicely
be in the
enumerated.
local police station, no?
Yeah. No,
And
no,
you
we'll
have to
do that.
maintain cordial relations with
next
them.
question.
So they
No,
come
but-
to your rescue immediately.
No, we have to rescue
We have to
ourselves by
educate
running
the
away.
police, our
Yes.
local police, that we have this weapon in our act, and why the hell are you not acting under it?
Yeah. No, one of the doctors, what happened was, this sort of a ruckus was going on in the hospital.
No,
The
we
patient
have
was
good
lost.
self-help
So
groups.
the gynecologist
Whenever
walked out
there is
to the
a problem,
police.
the group rushes
They were under the
and
impression
saves the
she's being
doctor.
arrested, and that was the way she was saved. They were taking her away to safety, and she walked away with them. So that is another thing, that under police cover, maybe the patient's attendants are thinking that she is being arrested. They are happy. हाँ, तो पुलिस के साथ आप निकल सकते हो.
We are coming to our next question. The doctor was brutally beaten, the furniture in the hospital vandalized. So can the police arrest the vandals? Anyone?
Yeah, police has to arrest the vandals.
And any law, Dr. Kishore, your expert opinion.
The question is that they have vandalized the hospital. Can the police arrest the vandals?
They should ideally. Yes.
Question
They're the same.
Practically कुछ नहीं होगा. Practically whosoever is powerful और उसके ज़्यादा contacts हैं, वही देखा
What?
जाएगा. And
That power counts.
really it happened when-
Yes, it counts.
You are right कि
So-
they have all the rights, but at
Right.
that particular time
Just a
जब
expert
mob आता
point
है, then it becomes very difficult, and it has happened in many of the.
Many of the doctors and all the hospitals are making now friendly units.
That अगर आप expect कर रहे हैं कि something is going to happen before DOT होने वाला है, आप inform पहले पुलिस को inform करो. I am suspecting कुछ गड़बड़ ना हो.
Acha, I would like to take help of our Justice Anish Dayalji. What High Court thinks about it? Should the police arrest the vendors? What should police do?
See, it has to be seen in the filter whether a crime is being committed. So whoever the person is, if somebody is vandalizing, that will certainly come under. Now there are two things. Sometimes police files a non-cognizable report if it's not something which is arrestable in that sense, as opposed to arresting somebody. In a situation, what the police might do, understanding the human problem, they might just say कि भाई कोई बात नहीं, आप उसको कर लीजिए, अलग कर लीजिए. अगर हद से बाहर जाती है तो पुलिस जरूर करेगी बात. उनको जरूर करेगी, contain करेगी. You can't see, nobody in the framework of the law can go beyond the law. There's no question about it. You may be angry, your emotions are not a justification for you vandalizing anything. There is no
Yeah,
question.
sir,
about
there's yet another question for you.
Yes.
The attendants refused to clear the outstanding bill.
I think
And
the
the
answer-
hospital
I think
authorities.
answer everybody knows to this. I think the law is pretty clear.
Sir, one question: from where should the hospital get that amount which
See,
they
the
have
law is
spent
very
on that
clear.
patient?
I think the Supreme Court had said long time back that the dignity continues post-death. Now that is clear, and I was just my office was doing some research on this question, and there's apparently an NHRC guideline also which came in 2018, which clarified this as well, saying irrespective of your charges, you have to discharge. I mean, you have to release the body, or even if it's a non-fatal situation, you have to discharge the Mareez. In fact, 2021, a serious issue was taken by the Delhi High Court in situations where money
Supreme
was not
Court.
being given.
Yes.
And so again, the guideline was reiterated.
Yeah,
So I
even the
think that is-
Supreme
now,
Court
as far
had
as the
said.
dues, as far as the dues are concerned, that's your legal claim.
Civil problem.
Claim. But you see, you can't contain and retain a person because there will be a penal action for wrongful confinement
Yeah.
also. It
The
works the other
Supreme
way
Court
around.
also, sir, in 2018 said that the body had to be released.
Yes.
You can go to a civil court to seek compensation, to
just-
recover the charges. Yes.
But then people are taking undue advantage of this rule, and what they do is when they don't want to pay the money, the bill, then they get their goons and they start. They don't pay the bills.
Yeah, this is the last question to our ma'am, Dr. Reba Tripathi. Once our case is decided by any counsel against the doctor, it is a negative case, then what all remedies a practitioner can sought?
Apparently, earlier, after a state medical council giving a negative connotation, you could go to the National Medical Commission. But recently, I've heard that there is, I'm not very sure about this, but what information I did gather was that now, currently, the NMC will not entertain a problem coming directly from the state. So, therefore, that doctor will not have recourse to the doctors' bodies, it will have to go to the legal courts in case they want to contest a decision that has been given by any of the legal, the DMC or the State Medical Council is basically quasi legal. So, therefore, they will have to go to the legal recourse because now the.
No, it is not true. One can approach. I have many clients who have appealed
in NMC
against the decision of the Delhi Medical Council to the National Medical Council. It is routine.
It was there till some time back, but I spoke to actually a member of the National Medical Commission who has given me this news, this information.
So that must be old news. The fresh is that it is appealable to the National Medical Council.
And even within the National Medical Council, there are various boards. So if the
Ethics and Medical Registration Board, yes.
No, if that also gives a negative,
you can still go and to the NMC itself.
You can go to one of the other boards first,
Yes.
and then you can go to the National Medical Commission
Yes, ma'am,
also.
yes, that's
so there is other recourse available, but each of them also is very time consuming. And of course, the courts are also, you can appeal directly.
It is time limited to about 60 days, they say, that you have to file the appeal, and the time in which they have to reply is also limited.
It's normally 1 month, 30 days is given.
Yes.
Ma'am, I would like to add one thing. I would like to add one thing to make your practice safer. One of the foremost things that you can do is to equip your hospitals and nursing homes with CCTV, with at least 50 meters visibility outside your premises, so that you can see and while entering someone or exiting someone. So please do it. If you don't, if you haven't done it, so
most of the hospitals have it.
but still,
in today's scenario.
but still don't. Many of the hospitals across the country don't have it.
So I think we are in the process of doing.
And all communications with the patient must be held in a counseling room which has got a CCTV with audio recording. 99% of medical establishments do not have a counseling room or CCTV with audio recording. It's like as the Honorable Judicial Officer just said, that we ought to have electronic record keeping, not only of documents, but also of communications consent made to the patient or relatives.
In fact, announcing of this news, DOT or anything should be done properly in a counseling room if we have one.
We
but unfortunately,
have got CCTVs installed in Lucknow in 1 or 2 medical colleges itself, in orthopedics, OT, in cardiology, neurology, etc. Neurosurgery, sorry. Where the doctors have to be sure that whatever they have done has to be proved in the court.
So ending the talk.
I can just share, you won't imagine how many crimes when they come to court we are solving by CCTV. It's because in heinous crimes, that's the only eyewitness.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes just the decision can be reversed merely on the basis of seeing the CCTV. So it is a very helpful tool. Of course, it should not infringe privacy.
So one question, can CCTV be planted in the OT?
No.
All the mishaps happen in
That's what I said, it cannot infringe privacy.
That's our privacy.
Sir, sir, may I ask a question? Do you accept the legal evidence as WhatsApp recording by somebody done of the event? Is it acceptable in the court of law as evidence?
बस मैं यही कहना चाहूँगा कि all the gynecologists you should have lots of money बिकॉज ये ना सिर्फ ये आपकी डिग्री ये नहीं है रजिस्ट्रेशन, सिविल में भी वो फाइल करेगा और क्रिमिनल भी करेगा, तो यू हैव टू पे टू लॉस टू द लॉयर्स सर.
We'll have to. I think we'll have to wind up.
Therefore, try to prevent all that thing. So that's why I think we all discussed for that. कि prevent हो जाए तो better है.
Now we have to conclude.
So we'll have to.
Question I wanted to know. It's electronic evidence. If it is backed up by proof of how it is created, it is. So there's a bit of an issue about whether WhatsApp is still digital evidence. Right. So again, it will fall within the same rubric of accepting. How do you accept digital evidence?
No, because suppose somebody has recorded one of
yes.
the other patient's relative or something, and they
yes,
share
yes.
it with
no,
the
but
doctor.
we look at video recordings. We look at video recordings, even if they're casual video recordings. Okay. For example, I mean, on a different note, we get a lot of cases on consensual and lack of consent, POXO, 16, 18. It's very difficult for us to understand. So we are given screenshots, chats. Yeah. So we make an assessment on that basis, just an assessment, and take a sense of what is happening. But in the true evidence procedure, like if you're having a trial of a crime, there it has to be formally evidenced that this is the digital thing. There's a 65B Indian Evidence Act affidavit and all that.
So just a clarification on this, whenever we talk about the concept of confidentiality and a recording, if we are video recording a consent or a counseling session with the patient, we need to inform her that this is being recorded. If the patient is recording the conversation with us without our knowledge, is that permissible? Because then that is breach of confidentiality for us also.
See, when you get into if somebody is recording without your knowledge, in any case at that moment you can't do anything about it,
no.
right? Because there is no knowledge.
Yes.
Right? Now later if something comes up, then it will be an issue of corroboration.
Okay.
That is this a doctored piece of evidence? So every piece of visual or audio recording in court, technically if it goes to a point of discussion, then it has to be checked by the forensics. That whether it is patched up, whether it's a continuous frame.
But it can be allowed.
Yes, and in today's world,
having
said that, we don't believe any video evidence very easily because it's so easy today. I mean, today with the new technologies, I can take your picture
and put another voice.
Absolutely morph it, and it's a new software. In fact, somebody was telling me today there are deep fakes. It's called deep fake. Okay. I can take your picture, have you make a speech completely on that. So we are entering into a very difficult world, including for people like us.
So let us wind up now. Just to say a word that beware of the loss of confidence to all my doctor brethren. And the kids was asked to write an essay, what do you want to be when you grow up? So he said study for 10 to 15 years to be a doc, then draconian laws and acts, especially for gynecologists, no family life, harassment by police and politicians, attacks by patient or relatives, and he said anybody except for a doctor. And thank you so much. And thank you so much, our esteemed panelists and experts, for giving us this time and for giving us so much of knowledge.
I just wanted to say,
thank you so much.